Good afternoon, everyone. We're at about 22 here, so we're filling up pretty quick. Thanks for your patience. This is the only class of the day that doesn't have a 5-minute warning. Turn your videos on, please, if you do not have them on, and don't put them on the ceiling, as that doesn't really do anything for us. Guys, put your last name also, please, on your name so that I'm able to figure out who's participating in the discussion also. All right, as people join, I'm just going to go ahead and take the screen share real quick here. A couple reminders for you. First off, still had people last time that didn't upload their questions or their notes. It should be a really simple grade. This is not meant to be taxing. Under modules for you guys, when we're done here, and we should have time. You should have time at the end of the period to do this before your next class starts. You shouldn't be worrying about your next class. Hopefully, we'll see how it goes. Okay, so we're finishing up chapters 10 to 13 and a little bit of 14. So at the bottom of that, you're going to see your test for tomorrow, but that doesn't open up until noon. And then your notes from discussion today and your questions, if you are in the outer circle, you upload them right here. Okay? Yeah. Second thing then is just to remind you, again, before you guys head out of here, chapter 15 next week, 331 to 359, the spread of the Mongols and Yuan, China. All right, so odd numbers inside. That's Kim, Katya, Kaylee, etc. Even numbers on the outside, so you have to write the questions and you get to ask the questions. Make sure you ask, remember, a minimum of one question, and make sure you participate a minimum of 2 times with some kind of evidence that is content related to the course, particularly not emotional. Like, I really feel like they were cool people. That's not super on topic, okay? All right, this is a really good review for you guys. It's going to be a little bit harder for me today to keep track of who's participating because we've switched it up. So like I said, make sure your name is in the participants page as your full name. That'll make it easier for me. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the share. And I'm going to let those people that are in the outer circle jump in. And go ahead and get us started. We're not even going to do hand raising this time. Just unmute yourself and it pops up automatically. So Lily Zafian Short, you were first, but then Jill, you can go right after that. Okay, go ahead, Lily.
Okay, so my first thing is compare how women were treated in the Inca Empire to how they were treated in European civilizations, and conclude if it was better or worse.
Okay. So to answer your question, I would definitely say that the women were treated a lot with a lot more respect, more in the Aztecs and the Inca time period than in the European and kind of like Middle Ages, because in the Aztecs and Incas, the women were actually allowed to like own property, and I feel like they kind of had more of like an important role on just the society. Like they did. Like women did a lot with like the corn and kind of the household, and they spent up to like 6 hours a day like grinding corn, which is really important for like the entire community to eat, where women and kind of like I feel like the European and Middle Ages were just kind of there to like for men to take advantage of and for them to just kind of stay at home and be like the nice housewife. So I think women definitely had more more responsibility and respect in the Aztec and Incas than in the European Middle Ages.
I agree with Lucy because in the Aztec and Incas, in their empires, they actually expected women to like work in the household and not necessarily like treating them as an object, rather like they did in the European civilizations, but they more saw women as like hardworking people and able to do those things. So that kind of shows that since they were expected to do things around the household, that shows that the Aztecs and Incas had more respect for women and knew that their roles were very hardworking and dedicated people.
So I have a question. What were some connections we've made between the Inca and Aztecs and other civilizations that we've learned about?
Um, I would say I remember learning or like I read it says much like medieval Europe, um, when the Aztecs rose to power, it was a lot about political maneuvers and competing power. And I remember there's also like Hinduism, Aztec gods or deities had a male and female form.
I read that uh, just like how Greece had, the Aztecs had city states.
Oh, sorry. Katya,
Oh, okay. The Pope in Europe was seen as like a god, like a representation of God, and in the Aztecs and Incas, their rulers were seen as like a connection to the sun god.
Both the Inca and Aztec civilizations had a focus on religion, tribute, labor, and agriculture. And then, but they had different climate and writing systems.
I have a question. What were the four Aztec clans called, and what did they do?
Um, they're called cow pulley. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correct, but they like redistributed land, organized labor groups, maintained temples and schools and other like social needs for their community, just like stuff like that.
I have a question. So, what do you believe was from like between the Incas, the Aztecs, the very best invention that had like the greatest lasting effect, and why?
I think the Chinampas was a very good invention because it was able to develop crops, of course, way faster than previously.
I think the Incas Quipe, or like you know how yeah, the Quipe, they kept records, and that was the best one because we learned about them, and yeah.
All right, I have a question. Explain why Aztec religion was heavily based on mythology.
I would say Aztec religion was like heavily based on mythologies because like one of their main worshippers or god was the sun, and just like in mythology, like there was a god for the sun, and in mythology, a lot of the time people like to put a god kind of with like a natural like phenomenon or something like in nature. So like Apollo was the sun god, where oh, I forget the Aztec, whatever his name is, but the sun god was also highly like worshipped. So they like kind of relate to that with like mythology, kind of how the Aztecs gave like a god to a certain like thing in nature.
Similarly to what Lucy was saying, like about the sun god, They used the myth that like they had to sacrifice humans to the sun god in order to like keep the world running, and they used human sacrifice as like for like political control and military control.
I have a question, and my question is, what do you think? Well, not what do you think. What are the differences between the Aztec rise and the Inca rise?
Can I clarify that? How about we go differences and similarities? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Aztecs like built their civilization through like on a lake, and that was different from the Inca, who mostly gained their territory by through military strength.
The Inca weren't big on trade. Like they really preferred to be independent, unlike the Aztecs, which were they had a complex trading system.
Oh yeah, just adding on to that, basically Incas were more based on agriculture, and the Aztecs were more based on bartering and trading to get what they needed.
I have another question. How did the Inca work with their environment, and how did the environment affect their community?
Well, they used irrigation dishes and terrace farming to work because they were in the Andes Mountains, of course. So they used that to kind of work around their environment.
Also, I remember like they were talking about how the Incas had a complex system of bridges and roads, and I think even like canals. So they probably worked like with the waterways in their community, maybe for like transportation, or they just like worked around it.
Also with their geography, they considered mountains, rivers, and other like geography features holy shrines, and that kind of had to do with the religion.
Okay, so I have a question. Examine how the Aztecs and Incas were influenced by some of the earlier societies of Mesoamerica.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so examine how the Aztecs and Incas were influenced by some of the earlier societies of Mesoamerica. I think the Aztec and Incas were definitely like, oh my gosh, what is the word? They're definitely like influenced by like earlier Mesoamericans by like in their agriculture and the way that they like use like different techniques and whatever, and then like the trade routes also there were kind of already there, so they didn't really have to expand, I think, as much as the Mesoamerican civilizations. And then I think they also got a lot of their gods and their polytheistic religion from the Mayans and like the Mesoamerican people before them.
They also continued to speak the same language, which was Nahuatl.
The Toltec culture, which came before like Aztec and Inca, their culture had to do with like human sacrifice and war, and that's kind of the same values reflected in the Aztec and Inca cultures, or actually just the Aztec, I think. But so the Aztec might have taken like similarities from the Toltec culture.
So I have another question. So since the Aztecs and the Incas, where they're located, they traded north and south, and how every other place like the Silk Road traded west and east. Do you think that there were any like differences between the ways that they traded? That was kind of like weird how I said that, but basically just do you think trading north and south is any different from trading west and east?
Yeah, I would definitely say it differed, just because like the geographical location. You know, who knows what type of mountains they might have had to cross as opposed to going like northeast. So yeah, just different land.
Yeah, to add on to Owen, they couldn't really trade west to east because like there weren't enough space compared to if they go to north and south.
Also, if you go north and south, that's also like getting away from the equator, so it might be difference in temperature the more you go north.
I have a question. How do you think the human sacrifice affected the people of the Aztecs?
I would definitely say the human sacrifices kind of it really kind of set in stone like where the Aztecs were religiously and like how their system was going to work. So I think that people really got like a good grasp of like what the government, well, what the king wanted them to do or what the king thought the sun god wanted them to do. And for a couple people, it might have been like inspired.
Um, Hannah, are you close to
Has the
Lucy?
power.
Oh, Lucy, we lost the last like 15 seconds of what you just said.
Oh, do you know what I cut off with?
Mm,
Oh,
what was
okay.
that? What was the summarization of what you said in 10 seconds?
Okay, well, it could have enforced like a kind of fear in some people to be like, okay,
We lost you again.
it might be because she's down in our basement. Like we have to separate because we don't want to like overlap each other. So she's down in our basement right now.
Gotcha. It's okay. All right, you were on the right track there. The fact that it installed fear in neighboring people is definitely. All right, so I got a question from Nate because his audio isn't working great. And he wants you guys to discuss, was the terrace farming of the Inca or the Chinampa system of the Aztecs more effective? Which one was more effective and why?
I feel like the Chinampas were more effective mainly because they were like in the water, so it probably took less work to like get the water to them. Make sure they were like not gonna die.
I feel like they were both effective for what land they were trying to farm on.
Yeah, because like I mean you couldn't do like the Chinampas like technique in the mountains because like it's on a slope and they had to be like in the water.
I have a question. Explain how you think harvesting season for chinampas would affect how long it took or how much they got.
Can you repeat the question?
Basically, explain how long it would take for them to harvest food from the chinampas, or how long it would take, or how would it be affected by the way they grew stuff.
I feel like it was a much shorter process and they got more out of it because, well, compared to like, trying to plant on their soil, I feel like using the water, it was easier to grow crops.
Okay, I have another question. Um, Discuss how the Incas' mita system, or their way of extracting forced labor, had an impact on their society.
Can you repeat the question?
Hannah, can you repeat the question, please?
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't hear. So discuss how the Incas' mita system, or their system of extracting forced labor, had an impact on their society.
It allowed them to complete projects like building huge roads and bridges.
It might have created or like expressed like the kind of authority that the government has to be able to like force people to do projects for them.
Okay, I have another question. Assess why the Inca did not develop a writing system and how this could affect them like later on too.
All right, they used kifu, which a system of knotted strings instead of like as a replacement of a writing system, and I don't think they really needed the writing system as long as because they were able to keep track of records and other like things using the system of knotted strings.
I feel like the knotted string system might have been like better in some cases because it like was more like probably sturdy than like using like paper or writing on other things. Like it was just more secure.
I also feel like it might have taken longer for them to do the knots on the ropes, so it might not have been as effective. They couldn't do as many, like keep track of higher numbers.
Okay, I have a question. So, what's one similarity between the Aztec gods and either the Hindu or Greek gods?
I feel like a similarity is that both religions were polytheistic.
Um, I think that throughout all the like religions, the gods were most often like they believed in them to and like used them to explain things that were happening, and they at the time they had a lot of questions about existence and afterlife and natural phenomena. So I think all the religions used not used the gods, but like um they put the gods on in really high status because they believed that they were the reason why a lot of things were happening to them, or like just an overall explanation to answer all their like really deep questions about their life.
So I have another question. Why did the mysterious Maya disappear?
I think they disappeared due to drought and lack of resources.
a drought, and they were also like overly, or like I think also I'd agree that it was probably a drought, but also the Mayans were extremely dependent on water in their irrigation system, and so they were cultivated and then had a drought, and that combination led to their downfall.
On top of that, you could add environmental like degradation, warfare, shifting trade routes. Like there's just so many possibilities.
All right. Does anybody else have a question they want to ask? If not, we are going to kind of pause participation there and talk a little bit about the test tomorrow. So give everybody else a chance. Okay. Good. You guys did a great job there. There wasn't a lot of content in this chapter that would be necessary to discuss. You guys hit a lot of the main points. If you were paying attention, and you're following along, which most of you were, really good review that you guys did on your own. So again, kudos to a above average discussion, especially for the topic. So getting better and better. Some of you are obviously becoming more confident in your participation too, which is really fun to see because we're not here in person. And so this is the one day a week I feel like I actually get to see some of your personality come out, and just to make sure that you are learning something and doing, following along as you're supposed to. So good job, folks. What I want to do, this is going to sound fairly basic, but I'm going to start. I'm just going to open up a Word document, which takes 2 minutes on my computer. And I'm going to kind of we're going to walk through the chapters together. You guys can ask me what you think, or I'll ask you what you think would be on the test from that particular chapter. And if you remember it, there's probably a good idea that it's on the test. Okay. So we do have, 14, 15 minutes or so. I'm going to use the next 8 or 10. Like I said, just to do a quick review once I can get a document to come up. And give you kind of the nitty gritty as well on the format, what you can expect. I've got there we go. I've got the waiting symbol right now, so bear with me, please. All right, so I think what I'm doing now, like I said, back here, I'm gonna share the screen, and let's just talk briefly. Let's go over the chapters real quick. So chapter 10 and 11. Come on. I don't know why it's doing this. Okay, well, as it's spinning, we'll just talk through this. You guys can listen and write down what you need to. So let's go chapters 10 and 13. Byzantine Empire, Kievan Rus, and Europe in the Middle Ages and late Middle Ages. What are some things that stuck out to you guys that you think might be on the exam? Just go ahead and unmute and throw some stuff out there.
The feudal system.
Don't use your notes too. We do this in class. If you were here in class, we would not be using your notes. I want to throw some out. So good. Feudal system is a good place to start. So understanding why Europe became feudal, the lack of protection, the Vikings, the Magyars, the Muslims invading, the basic tenet of the feudal system, the manor system, the relationship between lords and vassals, and then the power of the church in there. Good. Anything else between Kiev and Rus, Byzantine Empire, Europe in the Middle Ages?
Probably like the expansion of like extensive social methods like agriculture and bartering.
Okay, so improvement of agriculture, the Roman Empire, the three-field system, the mold board, and you had population growth, especially after 1000 CE. And then you said something about bartering system being replaced at the end of the Middle Ages by more trade routes and a stimulating economy brought in part by the Crusades, the Hanseatic League in Northern Europe, and the wool markets, the north-south trade between Italy and the wool markets in Flanders. Good. Anything else to throw out there?
Maybe the effect religion had on the civilization.
Good. So the religious authority, Christianity, the authority of the Pope at this time. You can mix in the reason for the Crusades there, kind of a summation, or what actually ended up happening in the Crusades was the Christians embarrassed themselves, but they did open up some trade routes. The Pope controlled society by controlling the canon law and the tithe. Good. Anything else?
I was gonna say like the Magna Carta that was signed by King John.
Okay, Magna Carta, good. Evolution of government, Magna Carta, rights to the common people, definitely. Let's go Kievan Rus. It developed as a trade stop between Scandinavia and the Byzantine Empire, and it was mostly influenced by the Byzantine Empire with its Christianity, and then the Cyrillic alphabet. Make sure you guys review Justinian. There's a good hint. And his accomplishments, okay? At the early part of the Byzantine Empire. All right, so that's chapter 10 and 11. There's at least 7 or 8 questions on the test that I just went over. Let's go chapter 12, which we just talked about. You hit all of the main key points in your discussion today, so I think we're pretty solid on that. Anyone have a question from chapter 12, something they're confused about? Okay, perfect. Yeah, like I said, discussion was good. If you're following along, you'll be great. You'll be good on that. All right, so let's go chapters 13 and 14. These are the ones. So 13 was Tang. And I don't know if I say it right. So somebody posted something on, I don't know, Canvas saying that I said something wrong, which is fine. I don't speak Chinese. So the Tang and the Song dynasties, the Sui, Tang, and Song dynasties. Real brief here, the Sui were the ones that reunified China after the fall of the Han Dynasty, and they connected the Grand Canal, which was a huge economic surplus, or allowed for economic surplus and trade to be stimulated in China. The other thing, the Tang, things to think about there, the influence of Buddhism the expansion of the Tang, the new rice that came from Vietnam or Nam Viet, which allowed them to cultivate rice in more difficult areas that traditionally couldn't be farmed. And then the backlash to the Buddhists at the end of the Tang Dynasty when they were falling, which brought power to the Neo-Confucianists. And then the Song were Neo-Confucianists as well, most symbolized by foot binding, if you remember right. During this time period then, you had a lot of different discoveries and advances by the Tang and the Song. Art was very important and expected to be produced by the people who passed the highest level exams known as the Jinchi and called themselves scholarly gentry. You guys remember the architecture, the thatched roof, curved roof, open-aired architecture called pagoda style today. And then the last thing I think for chapter 13 and 14 is the fact that Chinese values of Confucianism, some Buddhism, and their government system, their bureaucracy, made its way to Vietnam, Korea, and Japan at some point. Japan then, after its influence from China in the fall of the Tang, stopped willingly sinifying or taking on Chinese culture, and they turned inwards. They had civil wars, and that's when you end up with feudalism in Japan. In the feudal system, the daimyo were at the top, and the shogun and the Bakufu Tang government was at the top. Then the daimyo were lords, and the knights were equivalent to samurai. All right. I'd say one other thing then is in the late Song, running away from the Mongols, a lot of the population moved south. So if you remember right, there was huge population growth in the Song dynasty, even though they paid tribute to the neighbors. So they paid their neighbors to not take them over. Whereas in the Tang dynasty, they collected tribute from their neighbors. All right. I think I just went over most of the test with you, to be honest. Did any of that stuff sound confusing, or do you want anything clarified there?
I was wanting to ask a little bit more about the fall of the Tang and how that, like how when they turned like inwards on themselves and like started all the civil wars, like how that more like led to the Japanese feudal system.
Wait, so you just mentioned China and Japan. So,
Yeah, like the Japanese feudal system, like how it came out
okay,
of the Tang
so
dynasty.
they tried to copy the whole idea of a Chinese emperor in Japan. And then the emperor started living this really luxurious lifestyle and was very much influenced by Buddhist monks in the Fujiwara family. And then these large families who owned a lot of land started taking over the countryside. And there ended up being 3 families that wanted to have power. And the family that won out, I believe, was it doesn't matter. Yoritomo, or Minamoto, I don't remember which one won. But that creates feudalism because there is no strong central government, and the emperor goes running off into the hills and will stay there for quite a long time, basically with his own bodyguard and his own family. And there's no central organization of Japan until 1868. Long time. Good question. Anybody else? Okay. The format is going to be as follows. Just so you guys know, there's going to be 25 questions. You're going to have 45 minutes from when you press start. So press start, take your time. You can use your notes. It's open note because you're at home, and I'm not gonna sit here and act like you're not gonna use your notes. Common sense would say to do that, okay? There is some reading passages, so some questions are gonna take longer to answer. The questions will not all be in order for everyone, and the way that the questions work is people will be getting different questions, so you won't get the same question as the person that's currently sitting next to you on this fancy Zoom. Okay, so don't try to take it together with your sister or anything like that. That wouldn't be a good idea. Other than that, yeah, it should be pretty straightforward, okay? Multiple choice questions. Once you read them, stick with your gut, what you think is correct. It's not going to be anything that you have not seen before, okay? I didn't go out of my way to put random things in from the textbook or anything like that. All right, I got people trying to enter from other classes. Make sure you guys upload your notes and your questions from today, and have a fantastic afternoon. Bye, guys.